If you're interested in what I look like in real life, then make sure you check out my Instagram at Joe the Insomniak. Last summer, a good friend and I embarked on a backpacking trip through the White Mountain National Forest in New Hampshire. As fairly experienced day hikers, we felt comfortable in the Whites with our inaugural overnight trip. While planning, my buddy Ellis figured we could hike to a backcountry campsite to make our first wilderness night a little more fun. I wasn't going to disagree. Beautiful views, historic trails, and protected night in the Dry River wilderness. I was stoked, to say the least. Before any hiking trip I do, a little internet search on the trails or shelters I'll be coming across. Throughout the mid-1900s, there were a series of these lean-to ups and down the Dry River wilderness meant for backpackers or through hikers really looking to escape the crowds in more populated areas of the forest. Though as time went on, the Forest Service had other more pressing matters. Many of these shelters were dismantled, except Dry River Shelter 3, the last remaining shelter in the wilderness. On the morning of our hike, I met Ellis at the trail at the head and we set off. The sky was overcast, bringing with it a dense fog through the trees. The weather left us with nearly no visibility, so there went our stunning views. At least the trail consisted of prime, technical New England rock, scrambling alongside the river. Ellis and I made it up the presidential ridge, stopping by the lakes of clouds. The hut was filled with day hikers, backpackers, and through hikers all socializing together. We were even more rewarded with some sun, and a brief glimpse of the Dry River Valley on the summit of Mount Monroe, before the fog rolled back in. With dwindling views and a stiff wind, Ellis and I hustled below tree line, down to the river Shelter 3, our home for the night. Once we dropped off the ridge into the valley, we entered the wilderness zone where the rangers patrolled sparingly. Time to really be alone in the wild. As we trek into the wilderness, all signs of civilization disappeared and the trail was densely overgrown. Although it had been raining all week, there were no footprints in the mud either. At least we'd have some relaxing isolation, I guess. After about an hour or so of descending, Ellis spotted the lean-to just as our legs were asking for relief. I look up and there's this gorgeous old timber structure with a well-used fire pit alongside a cold mountain river. Pristine camping. As we settled in and explored the site, I found a small, bound notebook nestled into the corner of the structure. On the cover someone wrote, Dry River Shelter number 3. Out of curiosity, I opened it, but found nothing more than a lone man's name scribbled onto the first page and a date. Just your standard log camping log. Oddly though, the man signed the book the previous day. We saw no footprints or signs of human life or animal disturbances on the trail here at the shelter. Rain can wash away tracks, but not all signs of animal life. Something felt off to me. I showed it to Ellis, who found it curious but nothing more than the sign of a single man. He convinced me that he's probably a hiking veteran and a professional at LNT. I bought into Ellis's thoughts on the situation and my mind eases now. At the sunset, we started a roaring fire alongside the riverbank. Ellis commented on how quiet the location was, having not seen another soul beyond the chirp of birds since leaving Crawford Path. The silence is eerie, but we figure that it's just civilization that's desensitized us to the wild that we're actually in now. The sun was setting, and we grew tired with darkness. Ellis took the lean-to, and I spent the night in my tent. Sleep came quickly after hiking 8 miles with 20 pounds on my back, but it doesn't last long. A brutally sharp snapping noise awoke in me. The only thing I could compare it to would be a 2x4 smashing into a tree. I think, oh god, a bear's come to search our food, and that's 50 yards away. But nothing out of the ordinary for New Hampshire. Sleep took over once again, and I remembered waking up to the sun rising over the peaks. How can you sleep with a bear there? I stumbled out of my tent to see Ellis also waking up slowly. As we made our morning oats and coffee, I wander around the site again to see if I can find the marks a bear's left. Instead, I noticed something odd. The small notebook is open. I swear I put it back where I found it. Closed and in the back corner of the shelter, not open on the floor. Hey, Ellis. Were you checking out this camp log last night? Nah, I passed out, man. It's not like there's anything to read anyway, he responded. You sure? I commented as I bent over to pick it up. The lone hiker's name was not so lonely now. At least 20 more names have filled the pages. The lone traveller, whose name was originally on the first page, could now be found several pages deep into the notebook. I tossed it to Ellis, whose face instantly dropped when he sees all of the names on it. Great. Now I know it's not just dehydration or delusion from the previous day. Dude, we must have seen that thing last night. There's no freaking way we missed all these names. How could we? This is when I began to tell Ellis about the snapping noise during the night. I received nothing other than instant denial. These sounds were not the results of some hooligans or backward crazies following us. Ellis was convinced. It wasn't a bear either. Ellis led us out of the site and we instantly made our way back. A year has passed since then, and I'm still not quite sure what happened on our night at the Dry River Shelter 3. The memory of seeing a single name written on the front page is so clear in my mind now, I could not have mistaken it in. Could I have made the noises? Obviously not. I was asleep and they're further away. Ellis was asleep too. I would have seen him. I don't like to think it was paranormal, but it really begs the question. All logical explanations have went out the window. And of course a bear didn't write in there. It just terrifies me thinking of it now. I'm a 17-year-old high school guy with a weak body. I live in a small town in the Philadelphians, and this town is surrounded by rice fields, with a highway going straight across it. Part of my usual weekend routine is to go jogging early in the morning. This is at some time around 5 AM. My usual jogging route is from my house, somewhere in the middle of town, to a small hill with a wonderful view of town in the morning. To reach my destination, I would have to jog on the side of the highway. From time to time, fog would appear on the highway, and once you're inside, you can only see 10 or 15 feet before it all goes white. So one Saturday, I decide to jog. I invite one of my friends, the same age as me, to join me, since he follows the same route anyway. We left home at 5 AM, proceed to the highway. As usual, a thick fog blanketed the highway. The cars that would pass by had their lights on, and there were several one-ways because of road repairs. As we enter the fog, we decide to jog along the side of the road, past a couple of roadworks, about 100 meters along each. Now all's well at this point. We're a bit exhausted, but otherwise fine. We barely encountered anyone else, and usually they're just fellow joggers. Then we come across another roadwork, and we saw this guy crouched down on the asphalt. He was wearing a dirty orange vest, and he had a similarly dirty hard hat on. We can't really see his face, but decide just to ignore it. He looks as though he's fidgeting with something in his hands, so we thought he was just holding a few tools or something. Also, there was no one there but us, me, my friend and that guy. The fog's thick as hell. My friend signalled to me to keep a distance from the guy and I followed him. When we get closer, we can hear him humming a strange tune under his breath, which in of itself isn't that weird, but boy, we were wrong. As we get closer, he starts acting erratically. He stopped for a moment as I passed him, then starts laughing. It wasn't a regular laugh, it sounded sinister and a little dry. It was really loud, so it began to freak me out. We didn't increase our speed at this point, as we think he's messing with us. But he doesn't stop. He just kept laughing and laughing, and we knew it was beyond a prank. I can't describe his laugh more than I just didn't trust it. We didn't look back. We were speeding up now, as we were starting to see the hill. I was gasping for air, but somehow I didn't let that stop me. I forced myself on, and my friend was doing the same. He was probably 50 meters behind us when I looked at him. He had stopped laughing, but now he was standing straight and staring at us. He called out to us in my language in an arranged tone. That's when adrenaline kicked in. I just ran and ran until we reached the hill. In hindsight, I don't know how I was able to push myself for so long. When we finally arrive at the top, we're exhausted and nearly collapse on a cement bench and stay there for over an hour. Like a breath of fresh air, my friend laughs in a comedic manner. We then walk towards home. I haven't ate yet, I was so hungry, and as we passed the road we saw the guy in. He's no longer there. The only people there are wearing construction outfits that are working on the traffic signals, but nowhere near the man. As I got home, I told my parents about it and they said it's probably a nut job looking for someone to rob, who's probably stole the outfit, and I never went jogging again in the fog after that. This happened a few years ago when I was mountain walking. We started as a large group, but after some time of everyone choosing their own pace, I ended up walking alone. I was walking downhill through a thick forest area when I slipped on an unsteppable part of the trail, falling fully. It hurt quite a lot. Before I could get up, I see a deer walking out of the trees to my left, standing in front of me. This is not natural, because deers usually avoid human contact. Something was really off about this deer. I didn't know what. Its eyes appeared lifeless, filled with uneasiness. Then it opened its mouth to show multiple rows of what appeared to be razor-sharp teeth, and let out an ear-shattering scream. It sounded like nothing I ever heard before. It shouldn't exist. I watch quite a lot of horror movies, and yet none have come close to the scream of this. It was so demonic. After that scream, it closed its jaws and walked away to the side of the woods. Now I've never told this story to anyone else before, but I'm sure what I saw was a Wendigo. It just horrifies me knowing that I saw this thing. For a second when it happened I thought maybe I've hit my head, but I had no head injuries whatsoever and I knew exactly how I landed. It almost put me off running in the woods entirely. When I was young, I worked as a backpacking guide in Western NC. My schedule dictated a full 8-day shift with 6 days off. During those 6 days, to myself, my other co-workers and me would play in the woods. In the summer, you can't beat a mountain swimming hole. One of our favourite activities was called Paradise Falls, alternatively called Wolf Creek Falls. This is a cliff jumping spot with a huge swimming area, a tiny slot canyon and an inner pool. Most will venture just to do the small jump, even though it's the smallest and arguably least accessible. Even though the jump is almost 9 foot at most, you must do 10 minutes rock scaling to get there. We are all adventuring in and out from inside this tiny canyon, and you can't see the main pool. Well, we got to the jump and coaxed the first person off, a fellow guide who had never been to the spot before. She jumped successfully and swam into the main pool and beach area. Then she screamed. Because she was now out of sight, myself and another guide jumped in together and swam the short distance to her, with the others in tow. Of course we figured she was injured somehow. She was treading water and just staring wide-eyed at the riverbank. When I looked to the shore, there stood a man. He's massive, easily 6'7", and appears to have no hair on him, wearing beat-up overalls. Perhaps the most disturbing is that he had folds of skin all over his body. Imagine the Michelin Man, but this is on his face, arms and chest, everywhere with these weird layers. He's also armed with a shotgun, staring intently at us. He just stood there and watched as we grab anything important and speed out of there. He walked slowly back into the forest and we never saw him again. Around 8 to 10 years ago, I was at a lake way out in the woods on some land that my dad owned. I was alone aside from my dog, a terrier. I had only been fishing on the little pier in the southeast corner for about 10 minutes when I get an almost overwhelming feeling of being in danger, and then notice something or someone watching me from the tree line on the opposite side of the lake. I was a kid, but somehow keep composure. For some reason, I felt it important that whatever it was did not know I was aware of them. Anyway, it started moving slowly from tree to tree, near taking its eye off me, but never truly facing away from me. The lake's about 70 yards wide, so I can't really see details, but I know where they're facing. After realizing that it was following me, I pull my pole down and walk down the pier and up the bank towards the trail back of our cabin, which is about 1/4 of a mile away. Once I hit the tree line, I bolted to the cabin and waited there with one of my dad's guns until my parents got home. The only witness I had was my dog, and he saw it as well. I know because when he saw the figure, he instantly starts growling in a low tone until I make him stop. I have no idea who or what it could have been or what the intentions are, but they're most certainly not good. This took place in southeast Mississippi near the Alabama border back in the 90s. We didn't live there, but we spent most weekends up there. I know it couldn't have been a normal person, because our nearest neighbour was a very old couple who literally lived miles away. Aside from the lake area that our cabin's on, the surroundings very thick forest. The figure was extremely tall as well. I have a very good memory, especially for details. Also, shortly before I noticed it, I got a very strong feeling that I was being watched. I never felt safe there again, and I was so glad my dad sold it. This incident happened to me when I was younger, probably around 19 or 20. I used to drive around the countryside in the woods for hours on end, up to literally 6 hours, smoke cigarettes while I listened to music daydreaming. I've been through a lot, so this is a nice way for me to let off steam and digest all the badness that happened to me in the past few years. There is a route that goes into the southern part of my state, and eventually takes you to Maryland, if I'm not mistaken. If you keep going all the way, it will eventually take you to Florida. It was a road I found to be very fond as it intersected with a lot of interesting places. It could take you to cities and beaches alike, all the while somehow remaining isolated and rural. On one of those day trips, I was driving through a heavily wooded area that opens up into a field lined with trees on my left. I was pretty zoned out at this point, but something on the side of the road immediately caught my attention. In fact, it even seemed that time slowed, or I could see this apparition more vividly than any other thing I've ever seen in my life. What I saw was an older, balding man dressed in a full Catholic priest garb. His mouth is open, appearing to be in grief, screaming at the sky. He was standing in front of a dead deer, a buck. From what I recall, it was around 3 points, maybe 4. Behind the deer was a 1970s Crown Vic style police car with its lights on. It had no markings on it whatsoever to signify what country it's from. And no one's in the vehicle. I don't even think it had an engine running sound. It appeared as though the vehicle had been parked there all day. The other odd thing about this vehicle is that it has no damage on the front end to show that it's responsible for hitting the deer, nor was there any blood or anything. The deer seems fine. Taking a step back, trying to think of what I saw, it had the appearance of being staged or set up somehow, as if it was a prop for a movie. Everything was just so odd. For the speed I was travelling at, the glance I cast on this spectacle was only 4 seconds, but it so abruptly singed into my mind now. I have never seen anything like it. For some reason I started crying after seeing it. Did the forces that shape time or something just merge and I saw something from back then? I don't know, I've even been on the same spot from this trip, and there's never a trace of it, not even the body of the deer or tyre tracks from the police car that could be seen. Like a breeze, it was gone. A thing so out of place it could not have been from its surroundings. I have no answers to any of these questions. Only a lack of closure for something that's scarring my brain.